my name is Eliana Stevie.
I'm Carmel Bader.
My name's Rachel Ass.
And I'm Eliana Segal.
And we're representing Tarbut Torah Community Day School. Our Beit Din was asked to help settle a monetary dispute between Mr. Shalom and Miss Rubenstein. Rachel Rubenstein drives an Oliva self-driving car. The car has no human override option and doesn't require the driver to pay attention in order to function. One day, while driving, her car had swerved to avoid hitting a jaywalking pedestrian and T-boned Shimon Shalom's car. Miss Rubenstein's car didn't have enough time to stop and hit the brakes, and if her car had hit the pedestrian, he likely would have been killed. Once Mr. Shalom had recovered from his injuries, he sued Miss Rubenstein for a large sum of money to cover medical expenses, time off from work, and the damages done to his car. Miss Rubenstein thus blamed the car company, Oliva, for writing the program the car was using to navigate. The CEO of Oliva defended himself, saying that the car swerved because of its programming to minimize injury.
The first question we were asked was which type of halachic damages are at play in this case, and how would you categorize a self-driving car in halakha? There are 3 different types of halachic damages at play in this case. These include medical expenses, time off from work, and physical damages. According to Bava Kama 8:1-2, the one who owns the other is obligated to pay for these damages. In this case, that would be Miss Rubenstein paying Mr. Shalom. Although the one who owns his friend is also supposed to pay for suffering and embarrassment, Mr. Shalom didn't ask for compensation for those. Therefore, the halachic damages for suffering and embarrassment are not at play in this case. In Bava Kama, there are 4 different damages discussed. These include the ox, pit, truer, and fire. The self-driving car should be categorized as the fire. A fire is considered forewarned from the beginning according to Bava Kama 9b-10a. Similarly, anyone who drives a car is forewarned from the beginning. Even if the car company didn't specifically warn the user of the car of the potential threats, a person is always considered warned, and thus responsible for any incidents that come from using dangerous objects, as stated in Bava Kama 2:6. The self-driving car cannot be categorized as either an ox or a truer, because, unlike either of those, the car does not have a will of its own. This can be seen in Bava Kama 1:1. While both oxen and truers are alive, fire isn't, and is governed by the laws of nature. Similarly, the car is governed by the codes of its programming. Additionally, according to Bava Kama 1:1, the self-driving car can't be classified as a pit, because a pit does damage without moving. The self-driving car caused damage by crashing, which requires movement, into Mr. Shalom's car.
The next question is, who is liable to pay for Mr. Shalom's damages, medical expenses, and lost wages? The responsibility of the accident falls on Ms. Rubenstein. For one, her car had T-boned Mr. Shalom's car, and in order for her car to have hit the side of Mr. Shalom's car, his car had to have been there first. According to Bava Kama 3:5, when one person follows another person and damages their property, the follower is held liable for the damages. Also, Ms. Rubenstein's car was the one to initiate the car crash. Bava Kama 2:6 says that a person is fully liable for any damages their property causes, even if they were asleep or distracted. Because of this, even though she wasn't required to pay attention while using the self-driving car, Ms. Rubenstein is still held liable for the damages her car caused. Furthermore, the car crash cannot be classified as the uncommon wind referenced in the Rambam on Bava Metzia 82b. Even though this is the first accident involving an Oliva self-driving car, car crashes in general are known to be very common occurrences. Additionally, the car crash took place in New York, a state where jaywalkers are common. Therefore, the pedestrian cannot be considered an uncommon wind, and Ms. Rubenstein is still held liable. Additionally, Ms. Rubenstein bought the car from Oliva Industries rather than leasing it. By buying the car, she made the car her property and has to take responsibility for the car. Bava Kama 1:1 tells us that when something does damage, the person who owns the thing is held liable. This means that Ms. Rubenstein is to be held responsible for her car and any damages it did. Moreover, by buying the car, Ms. Rubenstein removed any liability that may have previously belonged to Oliva Industries. Bava Kama 60b argues that one must pay back damages done to someone else's property while saving a life. While the company wrote the programming, Ms. Rubenstein owns the car, making her responsible for the choices of the programming. This means that she's responsible for reimbursing any damages that were done. Ms. Rubenstein is also the one who brought the self-driving car into the situation. As previously discussed, the self-driving car is the equivalent of fire. Shmot 22:5 and Bava Kama 22a through b argue that when someone starts a fire, the fire damages property, the person who started the fire is obligated to reimburse the person whose property was damaged. This means that Ms. Rubenstein is responsible for reimbursing Mr. Shalom for any damages that were done. As mentioned in the answer to the previous question, the damages that need to be paid for are physical damages, medical expenses, and time off from work. While Ms. Rubenstein should be the sole person paying for medical expenses and time off from work, she should only have to loan Mr. Shalom money for physical damages to his car until he gets money from insurance. Ms. Rubenstein and Mr. Shalom's insurance company will cover the cost of any physical damages done to Mr. Shalom's car, and they will raise Ms. Rubenstein's insurance rates. If Ms. Rubenstein paid Mr. Shalom for the damages done to his car, she would end up paying twice for damages, once directly to Mr. Shalom and once through the insurance company. Teshuvot von Hehagot of Rabbi Moshe Sternbuch says that this would be unfair and isn't halakhically permissible.
The last question asked if we should instruct Mr. Levine to change the programming on a self-driving car. We've decided that Mr. Levine should not change the programming. Ketubot 19a states that saving a life is to the utmost importance unless it requires someone to commit adultery, sexual immorality, or murder, and the car crash breaks none of these laws. Additionally, upon first glance, Bava Kama 60b seems to debate whether or not it is okay to save one's life through destruction of another's property. However, as explained by Tosafot, Bava Kama 60b, the debate is actually about whether or not the person has to pay for damages they have caused while saving oneself. This is because of Pekua Nefesh, which makes it acceptable for someone to save himself in a situation like the one mentioned. An argument can be made based on the Rambam on Ketubot 19a that a person also can't save a life if it would require them to commit robbery. Crashing into someone could be viewed as robbery because the owner would have their property damaged and their time spent away from their job. However, this crash is not similar to robbery because we are ensuring that their owner, in this case Mr. Shalom, gets reimbursed for his damages.
In conclusion, the Beit Din of Tarbut Torah has ruled that the halachic damages at play are medical expenses, time off from work, and physical damages. Our Beit Din also ruled that the self-driving car is symbolic of fire. Ms. Rubenstein is obligated to pay for Mr. Shalom's medical expenses and time off from work, but their insurance company should cover the damages done to Mr. Shalom's car. Also, Eliva shouldn't change its navigational programming, but it should add a manual override feature to its self-driving cars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, judges, you now have 8 minutes to ask questions.
So in talking about the source, I forget which one it is, about being forewarned, you used air quotes around the word warned. So I'm wondering if you could tell us how you understand that term forewarned, or that she was warned ahead of time.
By warned, in the actual source, it says in brackets after it, it says i.e. fully liable, meaning by the word warned, it means that they are fully liable for any damages that are caused by their property, and they should know that ahead of time.
So they've been notified that if this happens, then they will be
are
considered
fully
liable.
liable. Yeah.
If I heard you correctly, I think you said that you would not classify the car as an ox because the ox has no will of its own?
No, because the car has no will of its own.
I'm sorry, the
It's
car has
following
no
the
will of
programming,
its own.
yeah.
Right. And therefore I see, because the car has no will of its own, you're saying it's therefore more like fire?
Yes, because the way the car runs, it's based on the programming. So if you put it in the same situation multiple times, it will have the exact same course of action, similar to if the setting of where you start a fire is the exact same, like same wind, same area, same amount of trees, it will have the same course of action. If you put two oxes in the same environment, or at the same place, in the same situation, they could have two totally different courses of action, which wouldn't have happened with this car.
Do you think by adding a manual feature override that would have prevented the damage to Mr. Shalom's car?
She said in the case that if she had an option, she would have pressed the brakes. And the reason we're giving her this option is because she's going to be held liable for the damages anyway. So in order to make it fair that she is held liable for the damages, we suggest that they include a manual override option so that she has a say in what actually happens.
Do you think that would actually be the case, that at the speed that she was going, and I think we assume it was the speed limit,
Yeah.
that if she had applied the brakes, that would have in fact prevented her from hitting the pedestrian?
It would not have prevented her from hitting the pedestrian, but if so, she would have been liable for that too. We are letting her make the decision of what she is liable for and what damages she must account for.
So by introducing a manual override, it makes it more clear that the driver is the one who's liable.
Yes.
So this ultimately benefits Aliva by making it clear that they're off the hook.
Yes. Also, as we previously mentioned, by buying the car, we are removing any liability from Aliva Industries. So this way, it's just because Ms. Rubenstein is going to have the liability for the accident in either case. So by this way, she actually has a say in what happens.
If she had leased the car, her liability would have been reduced or non-existent?
Yes. It would have been non-existent because it wouldn't have been her property.
Okay.
So you said you would want her to have a manual override because since she's liable anyway, that would make it more fair for her to be liable? Is that what you said?
Yes.
So does that mean you think it's not fair that you're finding her liable here?
We don't believe it's unfair, but by the way she has presented her opinion in the case, it seems as though she believes it's unfair. So we're trying to help lessen this unfairness, so to speak.
Did
from
she
her
do anything,
perspective.
did she do anything wrong in this case?
She didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but she did bring this car that did the damage into the situation. So she couldn't have known it, but that was her choice of using the self-driving car.
Is it fair that you hold her liable if she did not do anything wrong?
Yes, well, she didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but it also says in, I think it was Baba Kama 2.6, that even if it was accidental, they're still held liable for the damages done by their property.
If I may add, by adding a manual override option, it also requires that the driver to be paying attention, and which therefore, if the driver is paying attention, less things are, may incur upon her and her car.
Okay.
In a different kind of situation?
Yes.
Well, could you tell us what would be an example of an uncommon wind?
An uncommon wind would be something that would be completely unexpected or unaccountable for in a situation. So let's say a street pole falls over and the car has to swerve to avoid that. It's a rather uncommon event as opposed to jaywalkers and car crashes.
Right. It did happen in Toy Story,
Yeah.
but that was pretty uncommon.
Yeah.
Oh, fair point.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have a 10-minute break. Then Toledo, you're up.